Well, friends, we are glad that you are watching from home, and I know as Bonnie greeted many of you as you came on, there's probably others of you who have joined since, and we are so glad that you're watching. Even if you're watching after the service is over, we're glad that you're watching here on YouTube. But hope it's not just watching. Hope that there is a way that you are participating in the service of worship where you are. So in order to encourage that participation, we in the sanctuary are glad to be with one another and to share the Christ's peace with one another. We hope also that you would share that peace with one another in your home. The peace of Christ be with you all.
Also with you.
Peace, everybody. Peace, peace. Well, I know that in our day, we are tired of being apart and not being able to gather, but as we see the numbers of cases are going up and also numbers of deaths. So I do pray that you all would be as safe as you can be and maintain your social distancing and the like. And I'm glad that we can be doing that here in the sanctuary as well. I know we have holidays coming up, and so especially pray that you would be safe and careful, and even though your hearts may break for not being together with family members, that you would make those good and wise decisions. The scripture kind of goes to that kind of theme. It's from the letter of James, and towards the end of the Bible today, in the first chapter, just of 3 verses from that book. And it says, "My brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of any kind, consider it nothing but joy, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete, lacking in nothing." So in reading, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, it is particularly wonderful to have Chris Henderson here with us in the sanctuary today. It's 2 weeks since Chris finished hiking the Appalachian Trail. He did it a little unusually because the people were not allowed to start as they often do in Georgia and go all the way up to Maine. He started a little late, but went from here in Harper's Ferry up to Maine, and then came back and went from Harper's Ferry back down to Georgia. And it was 2,193 miles. I was I looked it up on Google, and it said 2,190, and then I shared with Chris that I was going to talk about this, and he corrected the number, and he added 3 more miles to the piece that I had written. And I'm sure those 3 miles were significant, as were every other mile that Chris walked. Sleeping in tents and shelters, eating oatmeal and mashed potatoes, summer sausage, and freeze-dried food. Chris says that his legs still ache. And one of the remarkable things about Chris's journey is that he ended it with a flourish. But even though he did that, he also had that transition of coming back into the world. So congratulations to Chris for ending his Appalachian Trail hike with a proposal to Tamara Watkins and their engagement, but also prayers for Chris as he enters the world again. In fact, when I texted him congratulations earlier this week, he wrote back and said he found it wonderful and hard to believe that Tamara said yes to a homeless, unemployed guy who's been living out in the woods and occasionally sleeping in sheds for the last 3 months or so. Chris noting that the sheds were what the people put together, and they converted sheds into places for bunkhouses for people who were hiking the Appalachian Trail. I really related to that sense of homelessness because I too was on a long hike, not nearly as long as Chris's. Chris is 4 times more than mine, but I did hike the Camino de Santiago, and I especially identified, as Chris talked about that coming back, with his identifying with the people who were homeless. And that sounds kind of funny that, you would even think that, I suppose. But if you've seen the movie Wild, you see there's a scene in there in which the woman who is hiking the Pacific Coast Trail also gets confused with somebody who's homeless. And while it's a matter of confusion, at least in the movie, the confusion is too real to really kind of disown it. And when it becomes true of you that you don't have a home, that you're living with a backpack that has all your worldly goods, in Chris's case, 40 pounds, 45 pounds. In my case, only 20 pounds, which is a lot lighter. But nevertheless, it puts you in a position where you don't have a place. And you're kind of on your own. And you're just living with what you have that you're carrying. And you smell and the like. And in some sense, you do become homeless for this period of time in which you are out there on the hike. And I wanted to connect that to this theme of gratitude that we are talking about here in November, because I think the gratitude kind of came. There is a sense of thanksgiving that you learn by being in this state. Now, one thing I do have to say to those of you who, do call us to worship and lead worship in the church on occasion, is looking at my sermon title is really not an invitation to steal my, point. So John actually got it really pretty close to what I was going to say about soft eyes, and I thank him for that, although he took away my little surprise that I had in the middle of the sermon. Thank you, John, for that. Although maybe John explained it better than I will, because I do appreciate all the things. I'm knowing John, he probably also had a kind of a video presentation to make with all those things going on so that we could actually have seen that. But he's right about what being thankful with soft eyes is about. It's about not taking a hard look at things. It's about taking a soft look at things. And where I learned about it was from Diana Butler Bass, who talks about it as something that she learned from somebody who was acquainted with the martial arts. Having soft eyes means that you're able to see wide with peripheral vision while you're doing martial arts. Or maybe if you're into other sports, just like being on a basketball court and seeing the whole court, so you make, passes, no-look passes to another player and they go in for a dunk or whatever that might be. Or if you are a musician, I just can't, I have to, when I do my guitar playing, I have to write the chords in over the words because I can't see if there's lots of bars and lines and words here and chords and music in between and all that. It's just too wide of a pattern for me to see everything at once. And I think about people who are conductors of a band or a chorus or an orchestra, and I'm like, how do they see all those lines for all those musicians at the same time? That's what it is to kind of have soft eyes, to be able to see more widely, to see with peripheral vision, to take in more of the world, and to keep from having too narrow of a focus. You can see how that works in a martial arts. Jackie Chan movie here. Think about Jackie Chan, how he's able to see with eyes in the back of his head, almost somebody coming to clobber him, and then does a move and throws that person on the floor. And the reason why maybe it's helpful to know it from the martial arts is that when we narrow our eyes, we trigger a fight or flight kind of response, and that doesn't help us to see the whole of what's going on. If unexpected stimulus comes to one with soft eyes, then the natural reflex is transcended and a better response can take place. And what I want to say about connecting that to Chris's hiking and being identified as a homeless, unemployed guy. And my sense of that on the Camino is that sometimes it's situations like that that get you to see more broadly. And that's really what I'm trying to encourage you to do today with regard to Thanksgiving, is to be able to see more broadly with a greater peripheral vision what are the things to be thankful for, and then to name those in your practice so that you can say thank you for things that you wouldn't necessarily be focused on. We might be taking a harder look at things, and that limits and narrows our focus for what is Thanksgiving. Like, when I went on the Camino, I was reflecting back as Chris comes back. And I have to say, I try to continue my Camino, as I call it. I don't know what, Chris, you'll call yours. Is it a hike that you took on the Appalachian? I love that I walked the Camino de Santiago because we were known as pilgrims. And we had a sense of, religious designation for how we were walking. It wasn't just that we were hikers. There was some kind of transcendent God connection to it all. I'm sure that you had that same kind of God connection in your hiking as well. But sometimes that God connection comes in ways we don't expect. Like I was able to go on my Camino with my daughter Karen, and one of the things that Karen wanted to do when we went on the Camino was she wanted to stay in the kind of simplest places. We weren't tent camping, and we weren't staying in a shed. But there were actually 4 different kinds of places you could stay on the Camino. One was a hostel, which was a room with 2 beds and its own shower and bathroom. The other was a private albergue, they called it. And that was probably usually a place with maybe 6 beds in it or 4 beds, and you can have a shared shower with everybody in the place. And then there was the municipal albergue, which could have 40 or 50 or 60 people all sleeping in one big room in bunk beds. And because of my earbuds and eye shades, I slept wonderfully. As who was here? Kim Peel was here the last time. He talked about how I would sleep through youth group overnights and just put those things in, and I was out. But everybody else in the room had to listen to me snore, including Karen, who complained about it incessantly. And finally, there was, and by the way, the private albergues were only €10. I mean, it wasn't like you were paying too much. And the municipal was €5. But then there was finally the parish albergue, which is the places where pilgrims could stay that was provided by the church. And you got to stay in those for whatever contribution you wanted to make. And Karen and I always gave €5, but we found that we were the most generous givers of thanks for the place to stay when we stayed in the parish albergues. But it took me like 5 nights to be willing to do what Karen wanted me to do, because I was not comfortable with giving up all the even small comforts that I could have. Just a little bit more privacy, just a little bit less snoring, just a little bit nicer bathroom. Those were the things I didn't really want to give up, even though I was, on this pilgrim journey. Until we came to the parish San Miguel albergue in the town of Estella. And there Karen coaxed me into staying at the parish albergue. And to be honest, the hospitalero, which is the host, was kind of gruff and had a harsh exterior, but then we found out that his bark was a lot worse than his bite. And he was actually a very kind and fun kind of guy. He would drink wine with like this giant glass teapot, and then he would hold it way out here, and it would just come out in a stream, and he would be able to drink wine. And it was kind of fun, all the different kinds of things that he was doing. He pointed us to where the Pilgrim's Mass was, and it was really the first time that we were able to go to a Pilgrim's Mass, which we thought would be every night on the Camino, but we only came by them every once in a while. And while he was bear-like on his exterior, I think Karen knew that Karen did definitely know that I was having trouble sleeping because I was not used to the changed circumstances and wasn't ready that it would be so different for me personally, and had a sense of claustrophobia and the like as I started out. And didn't have a blanket, and Stella was a little bit higher in elevation. And so Karen asked the hospitalero if I could have a blanket. To be honest with you, I think he gave me his own. And it was so touching that he would do all those things. We met there, two couples from the United States, one couple from Texas and one from North Carolina, and they would become our dearest friends as we continued on the Camino. We would have a sense of bonds with them and just rejoice whenever our paths seemed to cross. And sometimes we'd drift and not see each other for days, but then we would come together, and it was like a reunion when we would come together. The hospitalero told us we were carrying too much weight. You Americans always carry too much in your pack, he would tell us. And he said, here's a way that you could deal with it. You can actually put it in a package and mail it to the end of the Camino and pick it up. They'll hold it for you at the post office, which we gladly did and reduced probably 5-10 pounds altogether between us. That was kind of a moment, as I look back, of gratitude, of a kind of gratitude with soft eyes. I mean, there were many things to be thankful for as we hiked the Camino. Mountain top vistas that were just stunning and beautiful, with sheep and grazing and just a beautiful pastoral scene. Red and yellow poppies that were blooming to accent wineries or vineyards in Rioja, which is famous for Spanish wine. There was a joy, just the wonderful joy of being able to go on this month-long journey with my daughter Karen and have all that time with her. There were the meeting of new friends and companions. There was Bonnie and Tyler joining us with another week still to go before we ended our Camino. And then there was that coming into the courtyard of the Cathedral of Santiago, and all of a sudden, all the emotion of having hiked that great distance and come to the fulfillment of it. I don't know, Chris, if that happened to you when you went through that gate that starts the Appalachian Trail in Georgia, and just coming through there and having overwhelming emotion that I made this, I did this. Every step, you must have hiked 4 million plus 5 million steps on your way, and each 5 million steps. Yeah, ours was 1 million steps. So each one of those steps taken deliberately and with effort, and one after the other, and to say, wow, the accumulation of that is just overwhelming. And there were obvious sense of gratitude with that. But then there was a gratitude that you see with soft eyes. That sense of being homeless. The sense of being just, in the eyes of the world, kind of maybe a little bit forgotten. And yet, in that hidden place, seeing things that you'd never saw before that really connect with a deep sense of gratitude. One of my highest aspirations for our congregation is that, through my preaching and teaching and all the stuff that we do, that we help us all to be generous people. Yes, it is stewardship time, and I know that you've received Clark Sipes' well-stated appeal letter asking for your pledge and contributions in 2021 of treasure, time, and talent on behalf of our ministry together. And I do want to say thank you so much for the kind of generosity that as a congregation we've been exhibiting through the course of all this coronavirus, because amazingly we have taken in more money than we have spent, and we have actually spent kind of a little bit extra in supporting mission projects and the like, and our bank accounts are so much fuller than they were at this time a year ago, and it's just amazing to see all that kind of stuff happen. And beyond that, I know there's little projects that come. The mission committee has several projects of bringing food in and coats in, and we are every other week distributing food to people who are hungry in our community in partnership with Loudon Hunger Relief. And all those things are just kind of wonderful ways of us being generous. But I want to speak to that not just being a kind of a sales pitch and a success. I know many of you took the Dave Ramsey course from Hans and Stacy Newton, and one of the things that they teach in that class is how we get our financial act together, but to the end that we can be generous. But I want to point out that generosity isn't just a successful financial campaign or the fulfillment of giving that gives us a balance in the black for the year. What I mean when I say that I want to encourage us to be a generous people is something more of a generosity with that same kind of soft eyes. It's not a tip for, like when you give a nice tip, thankful for the good service that you received at a restaurant. It asks you to find a kind of gratitude in your life that is wider and more thorough than that. Like it says in the book of James, to see the challenges that we have before us, sometimes the uncomfortable places that we find ourselves in, and to see that as where the possibility of gratitude lies. And then to notice somebody like my hospitalero in Estella, who, with that sense of gratitude, gave me his blanket so I could make it through the night. That's so moving. That's so wonderful. And I would that, it isn't just our church budget to which you are generous and grateful, but that it's part of your life. It's part of who you are, part of what you're about every day when you wake up. How do I give myself? And don't we all know that it's like when we give ourselves, that we kind of become the people that really God intended for us to be, when we share ourselves with others, when we extend ourselves in love to the other person, it is that our true selves come out at that time. So we're really grateful that Chris could be here today and that we could celebrate what's happened to him over the last few months, and especially now his engagement with Tamara. We're really happy for you, Chris, and congratulate you and Tamara. Especially that you were able to propose as a homeless, unemployed guy. And I want you to actually come up here in front, Chris, and then stand in front of the camera, and I appreciate you have your mask on, but once you get up here, I want you to reveal the mountain man that you have become.
This is part of my transition. So.
They can't hear you, Chris, so.
Oh, okay. There it is.
He's actually trimmed up his beard, and we're thankful for it looking good. But we are glad.
And I was actually homeless because I did sell my house while on the trip.
Yeah, well, Chris lived across the street from us. He did actually sell his house. He was technically homeless, although he did have a bed to sleep in when he returned. Maybe that's why he had to propose. I don't know. But Chris wrote to me after I asked him if I could use what he shared with me in the sermon today. And as a final thought, he wrote this, that he was especially moved by the trail angels. Their hospitality was incredible. Everyone, hikers, shuttle drivers, hostel operators, they were all very nice and supportive. And he said, I met everyone from true homeless people to millionaires and even a former vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Randy, if you're watching, Randy, that's a message for you. Go hike that AT. The motto that I developed fairly early was consistent with that generosity and hospitality. Chris wrote to me, be gracious, humble, and kind. That's what it is to have Thanksgiving with soft eyes, to count it all joy when you encounter even hardship, for it's there that gratitude with soft eyes can become a practice. And I do want to encourage us to practice that. Will you, since Thanksgiving is just 10 days away, would you, for the next 10 days, either before you go to sleep at night or when you wake up in the morning, just review the day that had gone before and then name some things for which you are thankful? Will you do that? Because I think the practice of generosity and gratitude calls us that kind of generosity and gratitude that we recognize in Jesus, who gave himself wholly and changed the world and changed us.